Hello everyone, it's me, Zeeks, and I'm going to be showing you my space shuttle here. This is sped up 500%, so I'm going to have to talk really quickly here. Okay, when you first take off, you're going to need to throttle down your third SSME very quickly. This is going to be your primary control of thrust differential in the orbiter. Keep your eye on the nav ball, you're going to want to keep that straight. Just watch my throttle commands. You can see full power, third SSME is cut off almost all the way here. So you need to control it very quickly. The first few seconds of flight are very, very quick. Like I said before, this is sped up to be closer to real time. And you come up on a gravity turn about 15 seconds in. And so now you're at the gravity turn, and at this point you can just pretty much settle in until we get to we can settle in until we get to our upper stage gravity turn. So now you can see I've adjusted the SSME all the way up, working on throttling up now. Your best way of checking to see where your thrust is going is if you look at the pitch meter down in the lower right hand corner, or lower left hand corner. You can see the way the SAS is trying to pitch the ship. If the SAS is trying to pitch the ship upwards, that means you have too much thrust on the shuttle side, and you need to throttle down that third engine, or lower the amount of thrust in that third engine. If it's trying to push the ship down, you have to increase the thrust of that third engine. You can leave SAS on the entire ascent. You have plenty of SAS on this ship, and you can leave RCS on all the time. Like I said, on launch you need to wait 30 to 45 seconds before you do your gravity turn. Just make sure the orbiter is settled. The reason why we do this is because it kills the horizontal velocity created by launch, because the engines aren't straight on there. And you can see as we're ascending now, we're not pointing straight up. We're in fact angled over slightly so that the net thrust of the ship is pointing upwards. Okay, so at this point, what we're doing here is I'm throttling down both solid rocket boosters, simply because there's no longer enough fuel in the solid rocket booster system to counter the weight of the orbiter. So even with the orbiter's engines throttled up all the way, they can't counteract the thrust imbalance. So you have to throttle down the SRBs together. Once you're at 10 kilometers orbit, you can begin the gravity turn, but I wouldn't go farther than about 20 degrees because you're going to need all the upward thrust you have in the orbiter to get up to orbit. So you really don't want to go too far over because you'll end up hitting your apsis too early. Thrust is a very big issue with this ship. Okay, so coming up on SRB separation, you can see I've already shut down most of the engines. SRB separation, you're going to want to pull up as hard as you can because you want to pull away from those SRBs, because there's a very good chance that the SRBs could come in and hit your shuttle's wings. So now that we're disconnected, you want to have all 5 engines on the orbiter. That's both orbital engines and all 3 SSMEs. You should be fueling from the tank at this point. You should have a thrust-to-weight ratio of just a little bit better than 1. That's why we haven't dropped our orbit, our angle too far, is because we need that thrust to go up. So you can see it's pretty well balanced at this point. You should be able to run all 5 engines at full throttle without any throttle input, but if there's some throttle discrepancy, you're going to want to change that. So this is quite a long burn. This, I think, 2 or 3 minutes, probably more. It's one continuous burn all the way up to apsis, so you're going to need to get it right, because if you throttle down too much or you have an angle offset, you're going to have a very big problem. At this point, I just changed the staging, not because of anything normal. It's because on launch, the SRB that detaches the bottom of the orange tank fell off. It happens sometimes. So I moved that down so that the SRB on the top does not fire, because that would threaten the orbiter and potentially damage it. Now, that's been fixed in the new SLS Block 3. Or Block 1. This is the Mark 3. This is the precursor to the Block 1. And this one was... this ship has 2 orange tanks in the payload bay, as opposed to the new Block 1s, which are now in the download folder. But we'll get to that in a second. At this point, right before... you can see we've already gotten to our apsis, or very close to orbital apsis. We're going to have to refuel the orbiter engine tanks, and you can see that they're both shut off so that the orbiter doesn't fuel from them, you take the top tank and the orange tank, which should be off, and you transfer its fuel to the 2 engine tanks in the orbiter. The reason why you have to do this is because if you don't, and you leave the orbiter fuel in the orbiter on Ascent, it creates the thrust imbalance is just wrong. It just messes up the orbiter's balance as soon as the SRBs come off. So you have to let it drain out of those tanks on Ascent, and then you're going to have to fuel it. And I'm having some trouble finding the second tank. There it is. So you're going to cross-feed fuel into both of these main tanks. They should be the only tanks that drain on the orbiter. Of course, you're going to need that fuel when you get up to orbit, because you're going to need to make the orbital burn with the shuttle. So at this point, we've turned off our orbital engine so we can unlock these tanks, because these tanks are going to need to be used right away as soon as we decouple from the orange tank. And when you get up around 70K, the orbiter is going to probably start acting weird, because the fuel tank is very, very light. You might have to throttle down the third SSME, as I'm doing here. Throttle it down a little bit. Make sure to watch your apsis. You know, try to just, now at this point we've gotten to space. Now we just need to go as fast as possible before we decouple the tank. It's okay if you don't use all the fuel in the tank, but as long as you use enough, because I think the space shuttle only has about 1,000 to 1,500 meters a second delta V, so you're going to want to use most of the orange tank fuel in this. Now you can see I've really throttled down the third SSME just because of fuel imbalance once again, partially because I fed fuel back into the orbiter's tanks. You can see that's already making a large effect on the thrust. And now this is the orbital rollout. This is the roll so that when we drop the orange tank off the shuttle, the shuttle can go on its way. I don't think I did this right. I think the best way of doing this is, because it's going to have solid rocket boosters on it, when you disconnect it, you're going to want to, you can see I pitch up here, but when you do decouple it, you're going to want to level out the orbiter and then decouple so that the tank goes straight down instead of forward. Like you'll see in a second here, when I decouple it, I had a very large problem where the tank got in the way of the orbiter, and we almost had a collision. In fact, I think the wing scraped up against the tank here. You'll see in a second. So, I mean, we're still burning. We're burning at about 45-degree angle here, because we're trying to keep the ship from falling off of its apsis, because we really have a very short apsis. It was mostly an up and down flight, as you saw before. So now we're trying to get that orbital speed required. But we also need the thrust to counteract gravity. Alright, so here we are. We've staged. Important thing is the ship is built around the orange tank, so you're going to have to switch back to the orbiter, and when you do, the angle of thrust is going to be completely wrong, or your control thrust, so you need to set control from here, from the junior docking port. That's something I also didn't mention. You're going to want to control from the junior docking port at the nose. Sorry, I was just checking to see if there's any orbiter damage, which there was not. When you first launch the space shuttle, it's going to be slightly offset because of the way the control pods are in the orbiter. So you're going to want to select the junior docking port at the very nose of the craft. You can see it here, and you're going to want to select that, and you're going to need that to fly straight. So when you switch back to the orbiter now, you should have a relatively easy burn here. You're going to need to keep burning upwards, because we don't have enough thrust, or we don't have enough thrust to go completely sideways. We haven't broken away from gravity quite yet. And now at this point, this is because the Mark III has this very rudimentary fuel flowing system. So I have to activate these inner tanks here, which were held off for the Ascent. So the Block 1 has some integral tanks on either side of the payload bay. You're going to want to turn those on too. So just make sure all the tanks that are turned off, turn them all on so that the fuel can flow from them, and that way you should have fuel to get to orbit. The Mark III, this one, was slightly outdated in the fact that it had 2 orange tanks as payload, when in reality it can only take 1. And so you'll see in a second here, I'll be flowing fuel from one of the orange tanks in order to complete our burn. The download one that you have, that I have provided for you, has some tanks on either side of it, which act as this orange tank that we feed fuel from, and so as a result you can only put about 33 tons into orbit, which is the weight of one orange tank. But nevertheless, you do have that cargo capability. It's just it is reduced from what I was expecting. So you can see here I've run out of fuel, and I'm using the one of these engines here just to burn off some fuel. I redid it later, and it was I made a far more efficient burn just by completely filling up some of these later tanks here with the orange tank. So that's probably your best way to go. Action groups, if I didn't mention before, action group pressing the button 2 activates the orbiter engines. Activating button 3 activates the 3 space shuttle main engines. And now you can see I'm just fuel feeding some more. You can kind of ignore this because it should more or less be pretty automated. When you get the yeah, you can see my orbit is pretty messed up too, so I'm going to correct that in a second. And but when you get your Block 1 spacecraft, all you have to do is turn on the fuel tanks around the cargo bay and the 2 inside, and follow the steps that I had before on Ascent, and you should be good. You can, and it should have more than enough fuel to make its ascent and land. And that's all the video I have because it was sped up a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to download the craft, subscribe to my channel for some more awesome videos, and just, like and share. I mean, I worked really hard on this. It's 1,300 plus parts. I hope you enjoy. I mean, I hope your computer can run it. Iceman out.